I just had a wonderful conversation with Barbara Wild, the Good Wine Gal, a Canadian wine educator and writer. We talked about a lot of things to make wine more approachable to wine consumers, and she shared many insights how to gamify the wine tasting process to make it less intimidating, from hosting the BC Wine Tasting Challenge, inspired, of course, by the Judgment of Paris, and how to taste wine differently by turning participants into private investigators and not wine judges, and it changes the whole mindset. And she also praised the ISO glass, whether you like it or not, but this is a great tasting glass for the purpose of evaluating wine. And she reserved, her advice towards the end of our conversation to help you make wine tasting participants at ease so that you can transform your tasting room into a consumer-centric operations. So I hope you enjoyed the conversation as well. Let's go. Bonjour and welcome to We Taste Wine Differently, the podcast designed to empower you, wine professionals, and help you truly connect with today's wine consumers through the power of sensory experiences. Each week, we will explore practical, science-backed methods and actionable insights rooted in sensory and consumer science to transform how you taste, talk about, and present wine, ultimately enhancing the tasting room experience and building long-term relationships with your consumers. Are you ready to taste wine differently and adapt to today's changing dynamics? Let's dive in. Welcome to today's episode of We Taste Wine Differently. I'm your host, Isabelle Lesschaeve, wine sensory scientist, educator, and tasting coach. I am delighted to welcome Barb Wild, the Good Wine Gal, to the show. I'm excited to explore her approach to tasting wine differently. But first, let me say a few words about Barb. Barb Wild is a recognized Canadian wine media personality who brings a wealth of experience and passion to the world of wine, with a background that spans education, right? So we connected through a friend and discovered similar goals to make wine more approachable to consumers by creating different tasting experiences so that people can taste wine differently. So I'm really excited to welcome you to the show, Barb, and
Isabelle,
welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here because I just love how we met, and I love how dedicated your career has been to the study of and articulating of the sensory skills needed to become a wine professional.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your kind words. Appreciate. So we have prepared a few questions, but again, we can go on and off as we want to share. And you said that you love the fact that we met recently, but when we first met, you mentioned that you had been an entrepreneur all your life, mainly in hospitality, and that you became a wine student later in your career. I think you mentioned, you used the word mature wine student. So can you maybe share your wine journey with us from discovery to your current project?
Well, thank you for that question because it's always fun to do a sentimental journey. But I went to hotel school many years ago, and perhaps even before I went to hotel school, when I was in university, because I was started when I was 18 in university, the ability to get something fizzy other than beer on a Friday night to go to the mixer. I think the flavor at the time was something like Baby Duck, I don't know, Lone Ranger or something like that, Lonesome Charlie maybe, but it was this fizzy, sweet, bubbly, and maybe that was my first experience on my own. Going to hotel school, we had a beverage class, Herar Berberuglu. We called him Mr. B, became famous because he would bring international wine into this beverage class and we would all taste, but there was no protocol and everybody just drank everything that was in all the glasses. So that was the best class of the semester. But, at the time, if you tasted any of these wines in the early 80s, I mean, honestly, plonky, plonk, plonk. At least that's how I felt about it. So I developed a love for single malt Scotch whiskey, which is just pretentious as all get out, but whatever. But anyway, fast forward through my life, I guess, in the late mid 90s, I suppose, I tried my first South African red. It was a Zonenblom Merlot, and it stopped me in my tracks. It was like, whoa, like this is like a nice blanket around my shoulders. I'm just feeling warm inside. I'm having it with lamb, and it was just delightful, delightful. So suddenly there was this air of sophistication that you needed to have something delicious with what you were eating. And I think that's kind of when that started because I was already a foodie. Like the business was marketing and selling gelato that was made from 80% fruit and 20% sugar. And, it's very authentic in its flavor and delicious. Yeah. Anyway, so having had this palate for delicious food, why wouldn't you develop a palate for delicious wine? So yeah, somewhere I was sitting in a restaurant in like, let's say 2001 in Calgary. We were on some fundraising adventure. We're at the famous Caesar's restaurant where they were doing, tableside Caesar salad and like grilled ribeyes and all that. Very classic restaurant. And someone after we had eaten ordered a bottle of Amarone. And it was in the beautiful bottle and the cheese plate came out. And so then you're just tasting Cambozola or some Italian blue, and you're sipping this beautiful red wine. And again, it was like this epiphany, like, oh, so you can have wine all the time.
Yeah, and I love the way you described how the wine made you felt at the time. There was no about I perceived these smooth tannins and beautiful aromas. It was just like a feeling.
Which is, I don't know, I was like, let's say in 2009, I was kind of like, what should I do now? Everything else has failed. And so in my search, it came up that wine was this everlasting possibility of a career. And I hadn't really thought about it at all. But I was like, oh, okay, well, what does that mean exactly? Like, what kind of jobs can you do? And the long and short of it is I just enrolled. I had started studying sustainability. So it was a 2-year program. It was continuing studies at University of British Columbia. So I was doing that, but I was like, I really want to study wine because Barb, I invented my own scorecard. Like, I didn't know there was a scorecard per se. Like, I had an idea, but I just thought, all the wine professionals just created whatever they wanted, their own card, and why not? Anyway, so I boldly put that out as a blog or in 2000 and whatever, only to take it down because I was so embarrassed that I'd actually had that idea. So after you enroll in studying and they teach you a particular way of approaching wine, everything changes, which means you become a student. And that's not bad. However, what I didn't maybe realize is that your palate is something you have developed over the course of your life. It's personal. And the universal explanation of wine is particular to your palate in the sense that if you don't know what quince is, you're never going to use the descriptor quince, Anyway, so blah, blah, blah. I decided to get a job in wine retail. And a friend of mine said, oh, you need to do this course. And it was the diploma. And I just had decided I was never studying again. I'm old. I don't want to study. And I was like, maybe it'll propel my career.
Why not?
I know, why not? So I did the intensive immersion as I would do, 18 months, flying to Calgary once a month to sit in a weekend-long session to taste 48 styles of wine and to write handwritten tasting notes and review descriptors and study regions. And I have to say, I loved it and hated it. It's just the greatest love-hate relationship I've ever had. I am forever grateful, but you have to always have an open mind, which at the time was pretty closed.
Yeah. So diploma, and so did you pursue your career at retail?
And I have no rewards. There were no rewards offered for having a diploma other than I got the job, but the pay was terrible. And that didn't stop my studies. So then I was like, oh, I don't know that much about Canada is not spoken in the international wine study guides at all. Like a little bit, ice wine. And I was like, man, there's more than ice wine here. Like, look around. So I did the Canadian Wine Scholar program with Fine Vintage. And then I wanted to become an educator, but I didn't want to go the WSET route. So I started the Certified Specialist of Wine with the Society of Wine Educators. Anyway, all of that to say, I wasn't convinced by the time I was done all that. I could teach wine in any of these manners and feel confident that I was doing something right by the people sitting in the room, because I think one of the things I had to let go of was how I tasted wine before I studied.
How come?
Because I never talked about the descriptors. I never said dry, medium body, medium plus tannins, Who talks like that? And you can't talk to customers like that. You can't, like, customers are looking at you going like, what the hell are you talking about? Especially if they're new to wine. I mean, one of the great lessons for me was the way to put a boundary between you and your customer is to start talking in a language they don't understand.
Yeah, and that's really, what the debate is currently. We need to change the way we interact with consumers. And obviously, you have changed the way you interact with consumers since a long time, which congratulations for that. But it's really about making wine approachable by the language and talking. But I always say, like, listen more than you talk, because you really want to learn from the person or the people you have in front of you before deciding to share a level of to what depth of my knowledge that I've acquired through all these experiences that you have, to what level of depth do I need to go? And maybe with some people, you need to have those profound conversations about the technical shit of the wine. But for the majority of people, it's more about, do you want to try this one? I like it because da-da-da.
Well,
but, please,
no,
but like
I feel sorry now when I look back at some of my poor customers, because honestly, they'd ask me a question and I would stop talking 45 minutes later. And what did they understand? One man said to me at some point, just tell me if it's a good wine. And I was like, oh my God. And of course, me understanding that question was kind of like, well, where do we start? Like, what's good wine for you? What's the last wine you had? What do you think is good wine? Because it's not about what I think, which was the mistake that I love sharing. I'll talk your ear off, Isabelle. To be a good listener in wine only works 50-50. You have to take it in, you have to digest it, and then you have to have enough tasting breadth that you can say, because it's not only what's good wine, it's what is the price and, what is like, right, there's a whole bunch of qualifiers. It's like, I like to compare wine to like wine shopping to kind of like, or wine drinking to like golf, Your ability to develop your skills around tasting is like, it's practiced.
It is. It is practice. My students are fatigued by me saying all the time, you have to practice. I cannot do the work for you. I mean, you can read all the books, but if you don't practice, listen to your senses, trust your senses, and practice aroma recognitions, you don't go anywhere. And it doesn't have to practice drinking bottles of wines every day. It's more about being mindful and letting go of all your knowledge and just feeling the wine that we were, as we started this conversation. It's really more about feeling with all your senses. And knowledge help after to decide what a good wine is.
In order to give context to wine, you must know a place, many places. I like to say to people, if you want to know a place, pick up a handful of dirt and, taste it wherever you are, because that is going to be a source of influence for the grapes that make the wine. Doesn't mean you should eat dirt, but it's just one piece of the great puzzle of wine.
Yeah. Well, it's multifaceted, and that's why we love learning about it.
That's why we love learning about it. That's like why we love traveling to the places of, and why we love to sit and contemplate. I should be called the thinker, because I just love to sit and inhale aromas, and people are like already drinking, and I'm like, and when I say drinking, I spend a lot of time with people who don't know a lot about wine, and they lean in because they want to know, but they haven't developed that skill of spending time over a glass of wine where it's kind of like that meditation. Where you take it in and you take it in again and you take it in again. It's like 5 times, just at least 5 times. And people are ready to celebrate. They're in a hurry. No. Or maybe they don't have the context for what they should be sensing. Like, like, where do you start?
So is this pause that you advocate we need to have before starting sipping the wine. Is it what motivated you to start the BC Wine Tasting Challenge?
Well, no. I think what started, I mean, not initially, but what initially started me was I was running a cute little wine shop in West Vancouver. And so people came in and said, oh, we want to do an event for 60 gentlemen for this private school. And they love wine. But what could we do that would be interesting? I'm like, how do you gamify wine but still make it fantastic because you're tasting fantastic wine? So the first time I developed this, the first iteration was a card, and there were 3 clues at each table. And it was really just countrywide, like what country are we in? So there was a bottle of wine at each table. There were 3 clues. They had to pick a clue and they had to go around the room. And that meant they had to interact. And the idea of this was all the fathers getting to know each other. And so it was interesting because these wines were in brown bags. And I don't know that any of the gentlemen had ever spent time like that before. So for me, to listen to them have their conversations without saying anything was fascinating, to see what they were trying to figure out with each other, which wine was from, it was like Shiraz, it was like Australia, Italy, Northern Rhone, some such thing, like France. It was very generic. And then when we announced the winners, or like you show the bottles, which is very exciting, and then you go through the scorecard, and whoever got the perfect score then won the prize. And very few, I think there was like maybe one man, and he was a wine agent. So it's very unfair. He should have been eliminated, but he won. And that was really because he practiced so much and he had orientation towards spending time thinking about what he was tasting. But most of them would walk up to the table swirling. So it wasn't until someone said to me once, when you are doing this, like you have to inhale, your eyes are open. You can't, swish the wine all over you. But when you taste, after you've been inhaling the beautiful aromas, you should close your eyes and just taste with your eyes closed. And that for me was this aha moment. And that's the moment I really want to share with people, is that if you can tune out all the distractions and just be with your glass for a moment, it will change your life.
Yes. Well, we can say it out loud. It can change your life or your relationship with wine. So you went through traditional wine education, wine tasting education. You tried different formats to help people understand wine. You changed maybe your approach to talk about wine. So where are you at right now in terms of what you found the most, I was going to say efficient, but it's not about efficiency, but the most beneficial way of leading a wine tasting for people to really understand what you're trying to convey? And I'm relating to your wine tasting challenge, but that might be something else.
I think the current form of the wine tasting challenge is to give people a foundation. I value a systematic approach to tasting. I still think your approach to tasting wine has to be systematic. I think if you don't develop your sensory skills, however, it's very difficult to progress. So practice. When I worked as a wine buyer in Vancouver, I must have tasted, I don't know, like thousands every day. A wine, 3 or 4 agents would come in with their 3 or 4 bottles. And so every day you're tasting 12 to. So your palate becomes familiar with what is good wine. That's what I think. And it is about the scale that I use now in the BC Wine Tasting Challenge, is just very simplified for the purposes of bringing people into the idea, into the experience of tasting wine to evaluate it, which is quite different than tasting wine to enjoy it. Although, once you get to the other side of the evaluation, then you get to enjoy it. So it's this, yes.
So what is the scale?
The basis of the BC Wine Tasting Challenge is the Judgment in Paris. And Stephen Spurrier, rest his soul, used a 20-point scale. And it was 4 categories. Appearance. So he used it like eyes, nose, mouth, and harmony. This is 1976. So it says something about how we've developed this whole idea as well. So equal points assigned, which that also has changed completely. And maybe it wasn't even used like that. I didn't really get all the details on how this judging was done. But so in the current iteration of how I do the BC Wine Tasting Challenge. And it was France, BC versus France this year. Wonderful. Woohoo! They look at the glass and they rank, they look for clues. Be the investigator, be the private eye.
Okay.
What do you see? Is it clear? Does it coat the inside of the glass? Is the color so concentrated or is it light? It's trying to tell you something. So out of 5 points, then you move on. Okay, so now that we've looked at what's in the glass, now we get to smell what's in the glass. What are we taking in? What are the aromas? Are they giving us so much? It's overwhelming. Is it restrained? And then can we find something precise or is it generic? And then once we get past that is what is something that you can identify that's precise? And that's out of 5 points. Is it generous and giving and there's a lot going on, or is it? So out of 5 points. So now we've got 10 points down. So the next one is taste in your mouth. So we're looking for a bit more here because you've got to match well, you don't have to match, but what did you smell? Does it show up on the palate? Is it dry? Where's the acidity? Is there tannin? So you've got this drying sensation. And then that's out of 5 points in that it gives you everything you need to know. And then you move on. Harmony. I thought this was lovely. Harmony is a lovely word for the balance in wine that you want. I just love that word so much. So anyway, it was like, okay, is this harmonious? Are all the bits and bobs meeting each other gently, kindly, lovingly, or in a way that you say, wow, this is amazing? And that's out of 5 points. So it's out of 20.
I really love the fact that you place people as private investigator and not as judge, because I think when you put yourself in a judgment mindset, it's good or bad. Whereas in the approach, we talk about how we taste wine differently. So, you say, well, we want to find clues. And so I'm just curious for people who are more novices in wine or new to wine. So when you start talking about tannins and other sensations or even acidity, sometimes for people it's difficult to really relate to what you mean. So did you have like a little warm-up exercise to put them at ease on how to share their feelings, or they just went on and as a group play the investigators?
So that's a great question, because I wonder if that would have been a good thing to do, but I just tasted with them. So we did 3 flights this year. So I would taste with them on the first flight and I would try to demonstrate the steps and what I'm looking for. And we would do it together and I would ask questions. And one of the words for acidity that people who aren't trained, they use sharp. It tastes sharp. And I thought that was really interesting, so I could translate what that meant. I don't know all the terms, and I think this is one of the clues, I think, to how to break this down into like a layman's language versus a professional language. But people who are doing this just for fun, they're not studying it. I don't want to say they don't care, because of course they care, and they want their wine life to be wonderful. Of course they do. But to help them understand, so I would just express where I'm feeling the wine on my tongue, where I'm feeling it on my gums, if I was. And then they would do the next flight by themselves and the last flight by themselves. One of the shifts that I made was that I would do the reveal after the flight, rather than saving it all to the end, because then they had a sense of whether they were on the right track around their curiosity, private investigator, and I think that helped.
Yeah, that's the concept of giving feedback. That's something we do a lot in sensory science when we train people to develop their palate and their sensory skills. You let them experience and then you give feedback in terms of, do we agree, or if we disagree, on what point? And if we have a true answer, which only happens when we doctor the wine, when we add more acid in a wine, so we can say, well, yes, it's more acidic. Then we give them the feedback, and we really showed how it improved confidence, but also precision in people developing their skills. So I encourage you to continue.
Well, the confidence is the key, I think, because what started to happen is people were very clear about whether this was a good wine or not a good wine. Of course, the difficulty in all of this is to find wines that really are comparable. And that's so hard because in Canada, as you know, we are run by a monopolistic government agency that set prices. And so to find a Pinot Noir of a certain efficacy or beauty, and then a BC wine of the prices just were not close together. Like, and we have, this is another conversation entirely, but what should I pay for a bottle of good wine? It's like, oh my God, where are we shopping? It's like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that became challenging because you were working within a budget to put on an event so that the tickets are reasonable price. And yeah, so someone said to me, well, that's not a fair comparison. I said, well, that is what your palate is going to tell you. And that is the learning for everyone in the room. So it's not bad. It's still good. It's still learning.
Yeah. Yeah. So during your workshop, how many flights did you have?
Three
Like
flights
I
of
think
each.
you mentioned.
Yeah. And it would be like, I tried to make it fun and mix it up, but whatever.
Yeah.
And the glasses. So I think this would be a good question for you. So the thing that happened was I trained on ISO. And there's such a pushback against ISO glasses. Like, oh my goodness, such a pushback. Like, come on. Oh, well, the white wine should be in this style, and the champagne should be in this style, and the Bordeaux should be in this style, and the Pinot are like, come on, people. Like, when you're tasting to evaluate wine as a wine professional, I don't know. I think you should have the same glass for everything, because that becomes a standard. If you want to enjoy wine with friends, and have fancy glasses, great. I've done the Riedel like a needle testing where you have the different styles of wine in the different glasses against my ISO. And it was like, okay, I get it. Wonderful. What a great discovery. But it's very difficult to then ask judging parties to not have standardized glasses because, I just don't know what to do about that. So that was a challenge in the sessions because we were in a cooking school and we were using white wine glasses and Chardonnay glasses and Bordeaux glasses.
Well, to the question, ISO glasses passé, or can we go over them? As a researcher, I looked at the results and they are really good at helping us pick out aromas from the nose. And then it maintains a small volume of sipping because you put just 2 ounces or 60 ml in the glass, and that's plenty to perceive the aromas and then to swirl and then to sip. I know there are a lot of pushback of people who find difficult to put the nose in the glass, so, a point taken. But I know there are lots of, what is the word that I'm looking for? Not standard, but universal glasses. So I don't know if it's more like a marketing push or indeed they are fantastic for any wines. And I will put that in the show note. There is a recent MW research paper that was about comparing universal glasses and other more specialty glasses. Unfortunately, they forgot the ISO glasses to put in the comparison. So I was very disappointed, but the conclusion was the universal glass seems to stand out in terms of comparing or on being preferred to as a container to smell and taste whatever wine style. So I love ISO glasses and they are not too expensive for what we want to do.
And they work for all bits. They work for all bits of whether it's fortified wine, cognac, whiskey, wine. Exactly. Champagne was on my exam.
Yeah. Well, it's my favorite wine, as you
We'll meet
know.
you're from Champagne, aren't you?
I am. That's why I have a bias.
We'll meet there. I love Champagne. I love Reims. I love Épernay. I just loved it so much. Oh my goodness. Yes.
Yeah. So going back to the challenge, you had maybe a mix of professional and people new to the world of wine. What kind of unexpected feedback did you receive from the participants? Besides, this is not fair comparison.
Well, I told myself every time one of these events started, Barb, everything's going to work out for you. Don't worry. But I felt like I was playing Russian roulette because I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. And we're in the heart of wine country, British Columbia in Kelowna. And so I had a winemaker in the room who was the owner of some of the wines we were tasting. So I was terrified about how that was going to go. We had a gentleman who is a judge in Brussels and at the London Wine Fair in the room. So I was like, oh my God, what is he going to ask me? Like, I had friends that I have who work for Wines of British Columbia or who are working as agents. It was, you just had to know that the effort behind this was an uncovering and discovery. This was not giving you an answer, and there was no right or wrong, really. I mean, we voted, so it was democratic, and there was a consensus, which again would be my style. I'm not here to tell you right or wrong, because I say right at the beginning, what the judgment in Paris taught us was that everyone has an opinion. There is no one expert. Palates are personal, so drink what you like. Like, that's kind of the whole summation of what I really believe. But the discovery was, in doing something like the judgment in Paris, I called it the judgment in Kelowna, was really about, can we, in a wine region that's been poo-pooed for like ever, we're young, we're 50 years old, we don't make good wine. Like, it's just, when I was studying international wine, the arrogance around BC's wines are terrible anyway, so we don't really need to have them in. It's like, how did you arrive at that? Like, it's a 50-year history, So I wanted to kind of bust that myth, which I think we did successfully. And that was that we showcased wines at different prices. Like, one of the ones that I remember distinctly was a Viognier. And I'm not saying I could afford a Condrieu to put in the flight, because that's just not possible here. But you find a Rhone White and a reasonable price. There's lots of them reasonably priced. And then you had the single vineyard Viognier, which again is not exact comparisons, but the style of wine. Anyway, so some of what was the original question? The pushback?
No, the unexpected feedback from your participants, because you had a diverse audience.
So you will like this, I think. People who came to the event, I think, liked BC wine and wanted to see this experience, wanted to see if they could. So there was a bit of a bias in that people are consuming BC wine. So the thing that happened quite regularly was this. You'll love this. So they could identify which wine was from British Columbia, but which wine was of lesser quality or lesser score had to be the one that was the BC wine. In other words, it wasn't that they were assuming that the wine that they tasted and they gave a higher score to, they thought that was the international wine. And when the reveal came along and it was revealed that this was the BC wine, I think the summation would be, in general, BC wine is identifiable, especially to people who are drinking it regularly. And I didn't expect that. I didn't think there was, based on my experience in international wine, I just didn't, it's not the mainstay, but it is, or at least it's recognizable.
Yeah.
So I thought that was lovely. I thought the diminishing, which the wine that's the poorest in the flight has to be the BC wine. I thought that was interesting. And then the surprise at the end would be that I knew it. Like, there was this total flip.
Yeah. So it's kind of a prejudice that people have integrated in their mindset that we are inferior to France, which really, there are so many wine regions that it depends where it's coming. And I've tasted wonderful BC wines when I was in Canada, so I totally agree that we should be proud of what we produce in British Columbia.
And
good for you for doing that.
Well, someone has to. It's like a debunking. Let's debunk this. I think that's really my motivation. Is like, no, I have friends that are just never going to try it. They're just never going to. And they're international people. That's okay. But these are, if you want to spend $300 in British Columbia, you'll be hard pressed to find a bottle at that price, because we just don't have wine at that price. But you can get amazing bottles at $50 and $60 a bottle that will blow you away and change all your mindset ideas about BC wine. So I think there were some other interesting things that happened too, in that people show up and they didn't realize maybe that they don't read. People don't read anymore. Do you see that? Yeah. Like, you put out an announcement, you tell them what's going to happen. There's a whole list of things they're going to get, blah, blah, blah. They just never read. They don't know. So they get there and they're like, oh, we're tasting this? Can I start now? No. Just wait till, So, but to your point, it might have been a good idea to do a tasting together when they first arrived, maybe a little glass of bubbles. Okay, what are we noticing? Because it fresh acidity on the palate and livens everything up and gets you oriented But we also had
Mm-hmm.
pairings, little
Okay.
tasting,
Food
little
pairings.
bites.
Yeah. Mhm.
And that was also very interesting because people also don't understand that wine can elevate your experience. In other words, wine is delicious, food is delicious. I always say you put the two together and it elevates your entire experience.
Yeah, that's the principle. Although there are, we could talk about food and wine pairing on another episode as well, but there are sometimes some suppression, which when the wine is too dominant, the food doesn't taste as good and vice versa.
Hence,
But I guess you have more
well, but
experience than me to do that.
hence you need some experience to find the right food pairings to create this
Yeah.
elevated, to
Yeah.
demonstrate it's possible. Because otherwise, my mother's a great
Yeah.
example. What are we having? I'm having Merlot. Doesn't matter what we're eating, she's having Merlot. And it's like, it's okay.
That's a choice.
But this goes back to the original story and said, you drink what you like.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good segue to my question. The purpose of this podcast is really to encourage everyone to think about the consumers when we host tasting and to try to think differently and offer different tasting experience, which doesn't include necessarily budget jumping, but more about the discovery of wine through the senses. So maybe to help our listeners, if I gave you 2 minutes to teach me how to get better at making consumers feel at ease in a wine tasting, what would you tell me to do?
If you were interfacing with consumers and you wanted to put them at ease, what would be my recommendations? Oh, goodness. Well, I would first start by letting you know that it's okay to ask a lot of questions. You really need to know where they are in the world of wine. And you might even want to ask them if they have a favorite style of wine, so that you can address that by offering a tasting that fits into that realm, so that they feel comfortable because they have an orientation around, oh, I really like, for example, maybe it's Pinot Gris or maybe it's Chardonnay or whatever. But, if I only drink Chardonnay and you come to a tasting bar, then you want to maybe start with what they know, and then you want to progress the tasting.
Yeah.
But I think we blast people that come to a tasting with information that they have no context for. Okay, you're going to find this vintage, and it was like, okay, this is dry, and it's like good acidity, and it's like fine balance, and it's like people are like, what? Like, I don't understand what we're talking about. Like, what would be So I think if you can find a common ground, and then say, well, if you've liked this Chardonnay, we have a Roussanne Marsanne over here that we think people like as an option instead of Chardonnay. Would you like to try it? Or options after the first one, and how successful is the dialogue going? Because not everyone feels comfortable in an environment like that because they don't know what they're supposed to do. And in the tasting room environment, and I laid that on you, I don't know if that's correct, but this whole thing about, well, there's a tasting fee, but if you buy some bottles, like already the tasting fee will be waived. So already the consumer is stressing about which bottle they're going to buy, so not really paying attention to what they're tasting. And lots of tastings, you're not given a piece of paper and you can make notes, or there's no instruction about, oh, when we're going to taste, the best way to keep track of the wines we're trying is to use your phone, take a picture of the ones you like, or just something.
Yeah, make people at ease by meeting where they are at, as we always say, but giving them options to experience the tasting the way they are the most comfortable. Yeah, totally.
That's more than 2 minutes, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that was...
That's okay.
I could go on, but I think... but I think to understand where people are when they approach you has to be where you try to find common ground. But I don't know, maybe that seems obvious to me, and maybe it is obvious to everyone, but it sometimes doesn't happen, or maybe it doesn't happen a lot. It's kind of like...
And with technology nowadays, we have means, if people pre-register to go to the tasting, you can have like a very short questionnaire to know where they are at. And when they arrive, if you call them, welcome them by their first name and say, well, you might have like maybe 3 or 4 fixed tastings, but you can orient them to what you think based on their answers might be a good start, and being flexible in terms of the options. And okay, I will receive a lot of pushback. I'm not running tasting room and there is staffing issue and time constraints. But at the same time, if we're just rushing everybody, that's not how we build long-lasting relationships. So I think there is a trade-off, and there are opportunities, as you say, to connect before, connect during, give people what they need.
And to understand, what are they looking for? Are they looking to cellar wine? Or are they looking to have wine with dinner? Yeah. Are they looking for wine at the beach, a patio? Like, how sophisticated are we? Not everybody is there to buy wine they're going to put away for 5 years. And life changes in 5 years. So quite frankly, I see that as a diminishing value proposition. But, that's just me. I know I have friends who have these enormous cellars. They're like, what am I going to do? It's like, well, you're going to have to start having parties and drink this because...
Put everything on auction.
Well, and here, that's so difficult here. That's so difficult here in Canada to do wine auction. Oh, my goodness. And people are like, oh, I'll just sell it to my neighbors. It's like, well, be careful, because that's not legal either. So anyway, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, time goes fast when we have fun, as we always say. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about, Barb, about your experience and the way you approach tasting one differently that we haven't touched upon?
Oh,
that would be...
I don't really know. I just really enjoyed speaking with you. I think I could learn much from you. And I think for me, the idea that, this is a lifelong journey, developing your palate. It's like you can play golf your whole life. Well, you'll never maybe break 100 or you'll never have a, par round, but you keep trying. And so I think with that same mindset, it's like you just keep practicing, you keep tasting, and you keep thinking about, how will I express this to someone who knows nothing about wine? And that way we really want, I want people to come to wine. I don't want people to think wine is boring. Wine is life. There's so many stories behind wine. It's just totally invigorating for me, especially when you start traveling. So I think there's an opportunity. I have a friend, she started a small business, and it's like before you travel to a destination, she'll taste through some wines with you of that region so that you have some orientation towards it. It's lovely. And then the other thing is, if you don't know anything about wine, my ebook is Good Wine and How to Find It. And it's just all the tools, the tips, the tricks on how to find something you like. I'm not telling you the wines. Like, people are always like, oh, I wish you would make all these recommendations. It's like, well, they'll be mine. And then, they might not be yours. Try them. But I always try to point out the wines that are maybe under $20 that offer great value so that the bar to entry is low and the satisfaction of this experience could be high because the expectations are misaligned with what is good wine. So
that's a good point. Yeah. And the barrier to entry, really want to minimize that. Great advice. So you're based in
Yes,
Kelowna,
I hope you come and visit. Yes.
I will. So how can people listening to the podcast can get in touch with you to learn more about your ebook? That we'll put the link in the show note. But if they want to talk to you or find out what you are doing these days, where can they find
it's a very sad truth that I'm everywhere and nowhere. I'm on social media, so Instagram and Facebook as Good Wine Gal. I'm also on privately or personally as Barb Wild Barb, I like to say. But I have a website that has all the downloads and the ebooks. I just recently published a new one called The Pocket Guide to BC Wine, and it recommends places where you can go and get good education at a tasting bar, where you could do sit-down tastings where they're a bit longer and you could learn if you're interested and inclined that way. But yes, LinkedIn, Barb Wild, Good Wine Gal. Yes, I'm everywhere. Everywhere and nowhere. And it's wonderful. I have 3,000 friends from all over the world.
Wonderful. Well, at least, people will find you, which is what we want. And we will put all those links in the show notes. So it's been an absolute pleasure to have you and have this conversation and get to know you even more. And I'm sure there will be a lot of opportunities to continue our conversations and hopefully to taste wine.
Yes, I would love that. Champagne, Kelowna, wherever in the world you go, Isabelle, you keep me posted.
I will. Well, thank you very much, Barb, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
And that's it for today's episode of We Taste Wine Differently. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe or follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to learn more about how I can help you and your team implement a sensory-driven tasting experience, visit my website at InnoVinum.com. It's INNOVINUM.com. And have a gift waiting for you there. It's a free resource to discover the 5 mistakes turning guests away and how to fix them fast. It includes a tool to assess practices in your tasting room. You will also find the direct link to download this paper and the tool in the show notes. À bientôt!